In 2000, a startup with barely a customer walked into the biggest video rental company and offered to sell itself for just $50 million. The answer is no. Today, the startup is worth more than most country entire economies. The company that turned you down doesn't exist anymore. This is the story of the meeting that changed the entertainment industry forever. To understand how big this moment was, you need to understand how mismatched this two company where Blockbuster was a $6 billion giant with almost 9,000 rental stores scattered across the world. Renting a movie on Friday night practically meant driving to a Blockbuster. It was picture of American life. The company had just gone public the year before, and its CEO had a reputation as one of the sharpest turnaround executives in retail. Netflix, on the other hand, was barely a company at all by comparison. Found in 1997, it let people order DVD on a website and receive them by mail. It had about 100 employees and 300,000 subscribers. And that same year, it was on track to lose $57 million. Early in 2000, Netflix founders flew to Dallas for a meeting they spent months trying to get on the calendar. They walk into a massive glass conference room on the 27th floor of a Blockbuster headquarters. One of the founders later admit he was in his own world. When he first started, he knew a Blockbuster was roughly 1,000 times the size of his company. The pitch itself was simple. Netflix proposed that Blockbuster acquire the company outright. In exchange, Netflix would build and run Blockbuster online video business, and essentially becoming Blockbuster.com. It made a certain kind of sense. Blockbuster had the stores and the brand recognition, and Netflix had the online ordering system already built. After listening for a while, the Blockbuster executive asked the obvious question, what would this cost them? $50 million. That was the number Netflix put on the table for their entire company. According to Netflix's account of the meeting, one of the founders noticed something small but telling, a slight twitch at the corner of the CEO's mouth. He said they immediately understood what was happening. The CEO was struggling not to laugh. For a Netflix version of even, the company called their business a niche player and dismissed the online rental idea as .com hype that was, in his word, completely overblown. The deal went nowhere. It's worth nothing. Years later, the CEO public dispute the more dramatic version of this story, saying there were never serious acquisition talks that day. But both sides agree on the core fact Netflix over itself to Blockbuster for a $50 million, and Blockbuster said no. To be fair to Blockbuster, this decision looked far more reasonable in 2000 than it does in hindsight. The dot-com bubble was in the middle of bursting. Hundreds of internet startups were collapsing every month, and plenty of them had far rosier number than a mail-ordered DVD company losing millions of dollars a year. From where Blockbuster was sitting, $50 million wasn't obviously a bargain. It was a real check written for a company that was unprofitable, small, and operating in a business model nobody had proven could work at scale. Blockbuster had built an empire on physical store and late fee, and that empire was still growing. In fact, Blockbuster store kept performing well for years after this meeting. This wasn't a case of an obviously doomed giant ignoring an obviously brilliant idea. It was a judgment call, and it turned out to be a wrong one. Netflix went public in 2002. It was still small, still unprofitable in the eye of many investors, and Wall Street was skeptical. But the company leadership kept making a bet that surprised a lot of people. They were willing to sacrifice short-term profit to build long-term market position, even when investors pushed back hard. Blockbuster didn't ignore the online threat forever. Years later, it launched an on-mail and online rental service called Total Access, directly competing with Netflix. And for a moment, it actually worked. By the last quarter of 2006, Blockbuster Total Access subscriber, this was growing faster than Netflix. For a brief window, this refinery was genuinely closed. Blockbuster wasn't slow, often remembered as it fought back and it fought back hard. But behind the scene, Blockbuster was under different pressure. An activist investor pushed the board toward restarting the late Fiat company had recently eliminated fees that were unpopular with customer but prop up short-term revenue. This conflict over strategy escalated, and in 2007, the CEO left the company. With new leadership focused on stabilizing short-term number, investment in the online competition with Netflix slowed. That same year, 2007, Netflix made a move that would define the next 2 decades of entertainment. It launched streaming. Blockbuster was still fundamentally a company built around physical store and physical discs. Netflix had just removed the Ds from the equation entirely. The following years were brutal for Blockbusters. Store after store closed as customers shift to streaming and mail order service. In 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. The company that once turned down Netflix for being too small and too risky no longer existed in any meaningful form. Netflix, meanwhile, kept climbing. The same company that had offered itself up for $50 million eventually became worth more than most of the world's national economy, a market value hundreds of billions of dollars larger than the number Blockbuster once turned down. It's tempting to tell this story as a simple joke about CEO who laughed at $50 million. But the more useful lesson isn't about one bad decision in one meeting. It's about what happened in the year afterward. Blockbuster wasn't destroyed because it failed to see Netflix coming. It saw Netflix coming, and it even competed successfully for a while. It was destroyed because when it faced a choice between protecting a profitable business model and fully committing to a new one, it kept choosing to protect what already worked. Netflix, by contrast, was willing to make it its own successful DVD by mail business absolute before someone else did it for them. That willingness to cannibalize your own success is rarer. And it's usually the real difference between companies that adopt and companies that don't. If you want to see another company that had the willing move sitting right in front of it and choose not to take it, subscribe, because that's exactly the kind of story we cover next.